So let's go ahead and just get right into it. Let's see. One of the most awe-inspiring and humbling truths about God is that He is absolutely free from any need or dependence. His existence, the fulfillment of His will, and His happiness or good pleasure do not depend upon anyone or anything outside of Himself. He is the only being who is truly self-existent, self-sufficient, self-sustaining, independent, and free. All other beings derive their life and blessedness from God, but all that is necessary for God's existence and perfect happiness He finds in Himself. God has no lack or need and is dependent upon no one. To teach or even suggest that God made man because he was lonely or incomplete is a gross contradiction of the Scriptures. God did not create the universe or man because he had a need, but because he desired to make known the superabundance of his perfections, glory, and goodness. Number one, in the Scriptures, a name has great significance, in that it often reveals something about the one who bears it. What name does God ascribe to himself in Exodus 3:14? What does it communicate to us about his self-sufficiency? And A reads, I am who I am, Exodus 3, verse 14. This name demonstrates that God's existence was not caused, nor does it depend upon anything or anyone outside of himself. It is God's nature to exist, and so he simply is without effort. God has no need that must be met, no void that must be filled, and no purpose that requires the aid of another. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10, the Apostle Paul declared that which is true of all men. By the grace of God, I am what I am. Only God is able to declare I am who I am by virtue of his own perfections and power. 2. What do the following scriptures teach us about the self-existence and self-sufficiency of God? How do such attributes demonstrate God's greatness? Now we'll be in Psalms 36, verse 9, which reads, For you are the fountain of life, the light by which we see. And we'll get a summary on this one. This verse is stating that God is the source of life and truth, and that people can find clarity and wisdom in our relationship with God. And this verse encapsulates the idea that understanding God's graciousness leads to seeing the world in the light of his truth. Now we will be in John 5, verse 26. John 5, verse 26 reads, The Father has life in himself, and he has granted that same life-giving power to his Son. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself. This verse is meaning that the Son has life in himself in the same way that the Father has life in himself. God's life or existence is not derived from anyone or anything outside of himself. He is life. It is his very nature to exist. The existence of all other things, visible or invisible, animate or inanimate, depends upon him. Only God is truly free of need or dependence. The self-sufficiency of God demonstrates his infinite greatness and his exalted place above his creation. All things depend upon him for their very existence, yet he depends upon no one. In Acts 17, verses 22 through 31, we find the Apostle Paul's sermon to the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers on Mars Hill. In verses 24 to 25, he refutes that idolatrous views by making three very important declarations about the true and living God. What do these declarations teach us about the self-sufficiency of God and his relationship to his creation? Now we'll be in Acts 17. Verses 22 through 31. A, which is verse 24. God does not dwell in temples made with hands. And it reads, he is the God who made the world and everything in it. Since he is the Lord of heaven and earth, he doesn't live in man-made temples. See if we can get a better understanding on this verse. This means that God has given us the liberty to worship him anywhere. We are not just limited to worship him in a temple. We can worship God and we can worship God from our car or house, in our bedroom, or even our kids' bedrooms. So it's saying we don't have to be in a temple to worship him. We can worship him wherever we please. In Isaiah 66, verses 1 through 2, God declares, heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Where then is a house you could build for me, and there is a place that I may rest. For my hand made all these things. Thus all these things came into being, declares the Lord. In 1 Kings 8, verse 27, Solomon prayed, but will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house which I had built? Now we'll be on verse 25 of Acts 17. And human hands can't serve his needs, for he has no needs. He himself gives life and breath to everything, and he satisfies every need. So this verse is saying God is self-sufficient and does not need anything from humans. All right, now we'll be still in verse 25, as though he needed anything. The God who made the world and everything in it, the master of the sky and land, doesn't live in custom-made shrines or need the human race to run errands for him. To conclude our study of God's self-existence and self-sufficiency, we will consider Psalm 50, verses 8 through 15. What does this passage teach us about the attributes of God and about our relationship with him? Psalm 50, verses 8 through 15. Psalm 50, verses 8 through 15 reads, I have no complaint about your sacrifices or the burnt offerings you constantly offer, but I do not need the bulls from your barns or the goats from your pens, for all the animals of the forest are mine, and I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird on the mountains, and all the animals of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for all the world is mine and everything in it. Do I eat the meat of bulls? Do I drink the blood of goats? Make thankfulness your sacrifice to God, and keep the vows you made to the Most High. Then call on me when you are in trouble, and I will rescue you, and you will give me glory. And we'll go ahead and pull this up over here. These verses are saying that God does not need mere ritualistic sacrifices or outward displays of worship. He desires genuine devotion and a heart that truly seeks him, criticizing those who perform religious acts without sincere commitment, and instead calling for true thanksgiving and reliance on him during times of trouble. This highlights that everything belongs to God, including all creation, and he is not dependent on anything people can offer him. Here's some more verses I just want to touch up on. God desires for all people to be saved. 1 Timothy 2, verse 4. As we draw close to God, we ought to love our neighbors as Christ loved us. John 13, verse 34. And if we love anyone, our desire ought to be for their salvation. God does not desire that any should perish, but that everyone should come to repentance. 2 Peter 3, verse 9. So from this we learn God does not need our help or even our sacrifices. What God desires from his people is trust, thanksgiving, and obedience. In 1 Samuel 15, verse 22, the prophet Samuel declared, Has the Lord as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed from the fat of rams. All right, this concludes chapter 11. God is self-existent and self-sufficient. Next week, we will be on chapter 12. God is immutable. And you all have a blessed week. And Let's see how long this one is. There'll be a little bit of reading in this next chapter. Quite a bit, actually. But you all have a good week, and God bless.